On a cold November evening in southeastern Colorado, a scientist gently opened a small carrier at the edge of a prairie dog burrow. Inside was one of America's rarest animals, a black-footed ferret, wearing a tiny tracking collar and stepping back into the wild. Despite years of effort, something troubling began to emerge. During annual surveys, scientists struggled to find the reintroduced ferrets. This year, they hadn't seen a single one. The animals could have been hiding underground or dispersing across the massive grassland. But another possibility raised concern: predators. To solve this, researchers partnered with engineers to develop specialized tracking devices that could record three-dimensional movement without relying on satellite signals. Instead of driving for hours at night with spotlights, researchers launched drones equipped with radio telemetry and thermal cameras. The data confirmed what scientists feared: reintroduction alone isn't enough. Survival depends on preparation, environment, and timing. These findings don't mean the effort failed. They mean conservation is complex. Possible solutions include training ferrets to recognize predators before release. Thanks to decades of effort, the black-footed ferret is no longer considered extinct in the wild. That alone is a massive victory. What makes the story of the black-footed ferret so compelling is not just that it survived extinction, but that its survival continues to test our understanding of what recovery really means. Because saving a species does not end when the cage door opens or when an animal takes its first steps back into the wild, and nowhere is that more evident than on the windswept grasslands of southeastern Colorado, where science, hope, and harsh reality collide beneath the surface of the prairie. The black-footed ferret evolved alongside prairie dogs, relying almost entirely on their burrow systems for shelter and survival, and for thousands of years this relationship shaped a delicate balance across the Great Plains. But as humans transformed grasslands into farmland, roads, and developments, prairie dog colonies collapsed, ferrets lost their primary food source, and by the late 20th century, the species vanished so completely that it was declared extinct in the wild, a rare and devastating classification that signaled the end of an animal's natural presence on Earth. That declaration, however, was overturned by chance when a ranch dog uncovered the last remaining wild population, triggering a desperate effort to capture the surviving ferrets and begin a breeding program that would carry the species forward entirely under human care. From that moment on, the fate of the black-footed ferret became inseparable from conservation science, with biologists managing genetics, reproduction, and health in an effort to maintain a population strong enough to someday return to the wild. And over the decades that followed, more than 10,000 ferrets were bred and released across multiple states, transforming what was once a lost species into one of conservation's most iconic comeback stories. Yet success on paper does not always translate to success on the ground, and as reintroduction efforts expanded, it became clear that survival after release was one of the most complex challenges conservationists faced, because ferrets raised in protected environments must suddenly navigate a world filled with threats they have never encountered before. At the Heartland Grassland Preserve in Colorado, this challenge became impossible to ignore when repeated surveys failed to detect many of the ferrets that had been released, raising urgent questions about whether they were dispersing undetected, remaining hidden underground, or falling victim to predators almost immediately after release. The preserve itself is a healthy and intact grassland ecosystem, home to badgers that dig with incredible power, coyotes that patrol the landscape with efficiency, and swift foxes that move silently through the night, all native species fulfilling their ecological roles. And from an ecosystem perspective, their presence is a sign of success. But for newly reintroduced ferrets, it may represent an overwhelming gauntlet of danger. Unlike wild-born ferrets, many of these animals had never faced a predator, never learned to recognize the subtle cues of threat, and never experienced the consequences of being exposed above ground in an open landscape. And while instinct plays a role, Experience is often the difference between survival and loss. Understanding this required researchers to see what was happening both above and below ground, a task that proved extraordinarily difficult because ferrets spend the majority of their lives underground where traditional GPS tracking fails, and their slender bodies make even the smallest collar a challenge to secure, while prairie dogs themselves often chew or dislodge tracking devices during social interactions. To overcome these limitations, researchers adopted an innovative approach using specialized tracking technology capable of recording movement through dead reckoning, a method that reconstructs an animal's path by continuously measuring direction, speed, and orientation, allowing scientists to map complex three-dimensional movement without relying on satellite signals. And for the first time, this technology opened a window into the hidden underground world of prairie burrows, revealing how ferrets navigate the maze-like chambers beneath the surface, where they rest, hunt, and seek safety. At the same time, researchers embraced aerial monitoring, using drones equipped with radio telemetry and thermal imaging, allowing them to survey large areas quickly and detect collared animals from a safe distance without disturbing the landscape, replacing long nights of spotlighting with a tool that could reveal movement patterns in real time. The data began flowing almost immediately after release, and what it revealed was sobering because within hours, some ferrets were encountering predators, confirming that the window between release and danger was often measured in minutes rather than days. And while predators were behaving exactly as nature intended, the ferrets were facing a reality for which many were unprepared. These findings forced researchers to confront a difficult truth about conservation: that restoring a species is not simply about numbers or locations, but about behavior, experience, and context, and that even the most carefully managed breeding programs cannot fully replicate the lessons learned in the wild. Rather than signaling failure, however, this information became one of the most valuable outcomes of the project, because conservation advances through understanding why things don't work as much as celebrating when they do, and the insights gained at Heartland are now shaping conversations about how future reintroductions might improve survival odds. One possibility involves pre-release conditioning, where ferrets could be exposed to predator cues in controlled environments to strengthen avoidance behaviors before release, while another approach considers selecting release sites with lower initial predator pressure, giving animals time to establish territories and build confidence before facing the full complexity of the ecosystem. The research also highlights the importance of studying entire ecosystems rather than single species, because the interactions between predators, prey, and habitat structure determine outcomes in ways that cannot be understood in isolation, and by tracking predators alongside ferrets, scientists can begin to identify spatial overlap, timing of encounters, and landscape features that either increase risk or offer refuge. This work underscores a reality often missing from conservation storytelling: that recovery is rarely linear, and progress is often measured in small gains punctuated by setbacks. Yet each setback contributes to a clearer picture of what success truly requires. For the scientists involved, the effort is not abstract, because many of the ferrets released into the Colorado grasslands were born at breeding facilities hundreds of miles away, meaning researchers can trace their lives from birth through release and, in some cases, disappearance, carrying both the weight of responsibility and the motivation to improve outcomes for the next generation. Despite the challenges, optimism remains, not because success is guaranteed, but because knowledge is growing, tools are improving, and each release adds to a collective understanding that brings the species closer to long-term stability. The black-footed ferret story is a reminder that conservation is not about perfection, but persistence, not about isolated victories, but sustained commitment, and not about controlling nature, but learning how to work within it, accepting that some losses are part of the process while striving relentlessly to reduce them. In the end, the true measure of success is not whether every reintroduced animal survives, but whether the species as a whole continues moving away from extinction and toward a future where it no longer depends entirely on human intervention. And beneath the grasslands of Colorado, in the quiet darkness of prairie burrows, that future is still being written. Conservation isn't about perfect success stories. It's about learning, adapting, and refusing to give up.